at the Association of the United States Army. For those of you I've not had a chance to meet, I'm Carter Ham, and I have the privilege of serving as the president here at AUSA. You find yourselves this afternoon in the General Gordon R. Sullivan Conference and Events Center. General Sullivan, of course, well known to in the Army communities as the Army's 32nd Chief of Staff. I think he and Mr. Lewis started off together. Is that right? Is that something like that? But it is rumored that one can derive good luck from rubbing the bronze chin or forehead or nose or something of General Sullivan on the plaque out there. So if you're having not a great day, you rub the plaque. All right, I will confess that we rubbed it a lot during the World Series, so it seems to work, you know, so this it is not a bad thing. We're, again, very thankful that you are. I would, you know, we consider everybody here to be a VIP, but I'll single out just two in this august group. Lieutenant General Tom Siemens, the Army's G1. Thanks, Tom, for joining us. That's right. And right behind him, Lieutenant General Retired Joe DeFrancisco, Civilian Aide, the Secretary of the Army for Virginia. Joe, thanks once again for joining us. Sergeant Major Jefferson, your job is to keep all these generals under control, okay? If you can do that, then we'll be in pretty good shape. Well, my guess is in this audience, because you are here, you've been paying close attention to a renewed emphasis that has emanated from Headquarters Department of the Army, from the Secretary, from the Chief, from the Sergeant Major of the Army, and that's a renewed emphasis on people. We've talked a lot about modernizing the Army over the past couple of years. That has been principally focused on equipment, which is obviously a necessary part of modernizing the Army. A considerable effort on modernizing the Army's operating concept, which is similarly crucial to moving the Army forward. But I think for those of you who joined us downtown a couple of weeks ago, and those of you who pay attention to the Army, we have heard consistently now from Secretary McCarthy, from General McConville, from Sergeant Major of the Army, Tony Grinston, that while modernizing equipment is essential, having the best operating concept is foundational to what the Army does. None of that matters if you don't have the right people. And so we're assembled here today to talk a bit about that. And we have four distinguished speakers to kind of guide us through a conversation today. We'll start off hearing from Captain Allison Brager, and she'll talk a bit about who she is and what she does, and her current role as a member of the United States Army's Warrior Fitness team, and so she'll talk a bit about that. And Sergeant First Class Christopher Jones from the Army Esports Team. Those of us in my generation probably still don't quite understand what that is. My 8-year-old granddaughter's all about it. She's got this figured out, and it's more important, frankly, for her to have understand than it is for me to have understanding. But we look forward to hearing from both of you in just a minute, and I would call out that Captain Brager is from the great state of Ohio. Go Bucks! All right, that's OHIO. That's right. We'll tell General Murray we said that. We get big marks if we do OHIO for General Murray. That's always a big thing. After Captain Brager and Sergeant First Class Jones have made their presentation, I think take some questions, have some dialogue with you. We'll then hear from two great soldiers leading an incredible effort for the Army. And Army Recruiting Command, which, as you know, has the responsibility of recruiting the force for the regular Army and for the United States Army Reserve. And Major General Frank Muth, a great friend, a duty first, Big Red 1 soldier, will talk with us about all the things that are going on in the world of recruiting and how the Army keeps pace with a significantly changing demographic from which the Army must recruit. And then Major General John Evans, who commands the United States Army Cadet Command, ROTC, Junior ROTC, across the nation, again, as this audience knows, the source of most of the officers for the United States Army. Two vitally important programs to keep the Army moving apace into a very challenging future. So with that, if you would, please, a warm welcome. I think, Captain Breger, we're going to start off with you. So please, a warm welcome for Captain Breger, Sergeant First Class Jim. Thanks.
So good afternoon. Before I speak, we actually have a video to show you that truly captures the recruiting efforts that we are undertaking.
So, you're probably wondering to yourself, the U.S. Army has an esports program? The U.S. Army Esports Program is a recruiting outreach tool to help the Army connect with the fast-growing esports audience. 60% of Americans play video games daily. Video games are a way for players to connect with each other, build teamwork, and hone in problem-solving skills. Translatable skills in today's Army. Esports is rapidly growing in today's entertainment space, and the Army becoming relevant in this space is essential for building the connection with the target demographic for recruiting. What better way to connect than showing soldiers have a passion for gaming, just like the rest of the country? For some, gaming is a way to unwind. For others, it's a way to compete, come out on top, and show they have skills superior to others. And that is where competition, along with community outreach, comes in. It all starts on our verified Discord server, discord.gg/US Army Esports. It's open for anyone to jump in and play with our ever-growing community. It is the U.S. Army's only verified Discord community that is currently composed of over 10,000 active duty and reserve from various military branches, veterans, and civilians. Individuals can learn about the Army, ask questions, and speak to recruiters in their area. This platform is essential for community interaction and growth. As esports continues to grow, so will the U.S. Army Esports Program, and so will the need to build upon its vital space where the future warrior resides, turning their passion into profession. The only question left is, what's your warrior? With growing concerns of the health of young Americans, you might think to yourself, how does the Army find young people that handle the fitness standards? The U.S. Army Warrior Fitness Program is a recruiting outreach tool to help the Army connect with the fittest people in communities around the country. Fitness has always been a priority to a highly performing soldier. Many soldiers hone their skills to such a point they can compete and win against the very best in the world. To capitalize on these talents, the Warrior Fitness Team is a collection of the very best active duty soldiers who can not only dominate competition in the arena, but share their Army story. The Army has built relevancy in this industry, and it is essential for building the connection with the target population that can immediately perform Army fitness requirements. In 2019, the Warrior Fitness Team was broadcast on television and social media to viewers all around the world, but also visited high schools and colleges in every city. What better way to connect and build camaraderie than share in the challenge of a great workout and shared passion of elite performance? For some, fitness is a hobby. For others, it's a way to compete and show what they can do and win. And that is where competition, along with community outreach, comes in. This platform is essential for the U.S. Army to connect with young men and women with the potential to serve in the most demanding of positions. The Warrior Fitness Team finds warriors for tomorrow, but also the ones we need today. The only question left is, what's your warrior?
All right, so as you can see from both of these videos, there is a huge emphasis on elite performance, and that's really what we're trying to capture with both of these initiatives, is bringing out the eliteness in everyone and finding those individuals who possess the physical and mental discipline and fortitude and resiliency in order to be their absolute best every day. And that's also something that I do as a career as well. So I came to the Army later in life. I was in school for about 15 years to obtain all of my degrees, and then after that time I was lucky enough to direct commission and be stationed at the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research, just right down the street. And it was there where I got to work with these amazing group of researchers who are focusing on how we can best have soldiers perform at their best, even when they're under stress, they're sleep deprived, and everything else in the operating environment may not be going right, but yet how do we keep them in the fight, both physically and mentally? And I think that's a huge part of our recruiting efforts as well. So myself personally, I am a CrossFitter for the team. I fell into CrossFit after being a Division I track and field athlete in college. And some of the tenets of CrossFit that I think are truly captured and model an elite soldier are stamina, endurance, flexibility, as well as accuracy. And those attributes of CrossFit not only are necessary in the physical dimension, but also the mental dimension. And so that's why I believe this is a great recruiting effort as we go into high schools and to colleges, to get those students who have all of these attributes and to bring these attributes to the Army. As you can also see from this video, we really do have an elite team who are competing in CrossFit and competing in strongman, not just on the national stage, but on the international stage. So we've been around for about 4 months now as a company, and within this 4-month period, we had one soldier, Captain Smith, place 15th in the world. So he is the 15th fittest man in the world in July. We also had Sergeant Furman, who is the world's strongest man. That's not, any sort of exaggeration. He literally is the world's strongest man in his weight class. And then, as you also saw, we have Captain Deanna Clegg, who just last week set a world record in powerlifting with some really remarkable numbers. And it's just truly amazing the amount of talent that we have is able to go out, showcase this talent to the American public, and again, get these elite, high-quality recruits that can further build our future fighting force. So thank you. I have a PhD in neuroscience.
All right, how's everyone doing? My name is Sergeant First Class Christopher Jones. I'm originally from outside of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I'm the NCOIC for the Esports Team. So, of course, obviously the first question is going to be why, right? Why are we in gaming? Well, the great thing about gaming, currently over 100 million Americans participate in some form of gaming. If you have a phone, you're participating in gaming. And with the impact of this, our bottom line upfront mission in the U.S. Army Esports program is to connect America to its Army through the passion of gaming. As me, myself, have been an avid gamer since I was about 6 years old. Well before I ever joined the Army, my passion has always been there. The entertainment value of gaming is currently the largest in the world, so it eclipses the movie industry currently. And as well as the esports industry by itself is about to be $1 billion industry, so one of the fastest growing sports venues out there. And our research has been showing Generation Z prefers authenticity. So what we're telling is human stories. We're telling the soldier underneath the uniform how that we have a shared passion. And a great number to show is over 50% of Generation Z shows that gaming does have an impact in society. And then over 45% of adults believe that gaming does help develop critical skills like critical thinking, hand-eye coordination, and all of those types of skills. So what we end up doing is do multiple levels of engagement, whether it's in the virtual world or whether it's face-to-face. We're a competitive esports organization, so we have games like the League of Legends, Overwatch, Fortnite, games that are very relevant in today's society. And not only that, we can compete on the virtual space as well as face-to-face during conventions. So we are connecting in a very, very unique way on platforms like Twitch, which has over 1.4 million daily viewers, which is more than your traditional news channels and all the other channels like that. Some of our notoriety as far as how this works into a lead generating activity, one of our events, PAX East, which stands for Penny Arcade Expo, it's in Boston, Massachusetts. That was one of the largest multi-day events in USAREC history, generating over 1,100 leads for a single event. So that was 1,100 leads, over 800 of that being quality leads. And we've kind of replicated that situation all across the United States. So whether it's in a high school, whether it's in a university, it's in a convention scene, this is mainstream The group of gaming, this is not niche anymore. It is the most mainstream that we're going to find, and we've been finding absolute success in it, as well as our soldiers placing very well. We have some of our soldiers being the top 500 players in the world in their respective title, as well as a good example, we played the Air Force Academy, Overwatch. We streamed that on Twitch, on our own Twitch channel. We ended up beating them for about an hour straight, which is to be expected. Army leads the way. So, this program obviously is one of the fastest growing industries in the world. So I definitely want to thank Major General Muth. Without him and Sergeant Major Gavia, this type of program would not exist. This would not be something that we're able to actually showcase for not just the Army, but for the world, setting that standard and showing that from a 25 Bravo information technology specialist all the way to an 18 Echo Special Forces operator, gamers exist everywhere. Thank you.
Could you talk a little bit about how do you convert the contacts that you make through your activities? How do you connect them with recruiters?
So one of the ways we do that is through the EMM Connect App. That's an app that every recruiter has available. We use that at conventions as well as local engagements. So whether it's on a phone, a tablet, we can actually input a lead's information, and that actually goes directly into the system. Based on that zip code that that person puts into their information, that'll go directly to the recruiting station locally to them.
So in addition to that, we've been using a unique strategy on the functional fitness side. We've been going directly into ROTC programs and sort of organizing a morning PT session that is a little different than what they're used to. We did that very recently during AUSA. We went to the Georgetown Battalion, and we had this great sprint workout right there in front of the Lincoln Memorial for them to do. And we also used it as an opportunity to showcase that the Army pretty much has a career for everyone. What's really unique about our team is we have a lot of degreed professionals in medicine and in aviation and career fields of the Army that you typically would not think about. And so it's a great way for us to reach out to these cadets and also high schoolers and truly show that you can be successful in anything through the Army.
Could you share, you spoke about the different degrees, so could you share the connection of your area, which is neuroscience and physical fitness, and how those basically, there is an underlying connection to those?
Sure, absolutely. So a few years ago, before I was in the Army, I published a book called Meathead, Unraveling the Athletic Brain, which sort of captures the unique attributes at the level of the brain of an athlete. There's sort of been this myth. I experienced this in college. I was fortunate. I went to an Ivy League, and the athletes at Ivies were sort of stereotyped as dumb jocks that, we got there not through our academic accolades, but our athletic accolades. And the more research I started to do in neuroscience, I realized that this was entirely not true. And there's a lot of amazing things that can happen in the brain just through athletic training and doing something day in and day out. And then, of course, when you talk about self-care and self-preservation away from training, focus on nutrition, getting good quality sleep, all those things that make up an elite athlete, those also lead to the best possible brain health as well.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, this is amazing. Do you find, and it's for the esports, a lot of your gamers might not be as physically ready to go into the Army as maybe others, and that could be a stereotype, so I apologize if it is. But among the folks that you might see as potential recruits, do you have a program that kind of combines the two, right? The getting them ready to be able to go through the physical aspect of being a soldier, and at the same time using their skills to do some of the things that their really great skills utilize?
I think a good way to answer that is kind of like I spoke before with the general population. since we have over 100 million Americans that participate in gaming, it is actually fits across the board. So some of the ones that you might once have called a bookworm or something like that, there's a lot of connective tissue because of gaming. I use the example, my soldiers are kind of that direct representation of that. When I do have a 25 Bravo IT specialist soldier and then a special forces soldier, it kind of showcases that proof of concept to the American public to show that a gamer is just an entertainment, kind of like if you really enjoy a movie, you really enjoy golf or another sport. Some people really like to watch football but never really play it, or they play it a little bit. Gaming kind of follows that same metric, so we want to make that connection to them that way. So with somebody like a infantryman soldier who is a video game player, who is a competitive esports player, we have them showcase that to them through that human perspective to say, hey, I like to hunt and fish as well, but I really love gaming and esports, but I'm also super successful in the Army. And what I've seen growing up in this community is that there is a lot of crossover. There's plenty of NFL players that you notice will make gaming and other nerd-like references during football games. So I think it's really mainstream is where I'm kind of pushing home there. But we want to kind of capture that information, kind of like Sergeant David, while we were at the expo, did the Warrior Fitness Challenge. So those kind of crossover events as well is what we also want to showcase.
I'll also mention too, so I've been lucky enough to work with the e-gamers on collecting some amazing cognitive data, and we have data to show now that our very own e-gamers actually outperform NBA and NFL players on these same tests that they took out in this elite sports academy, and our e-gamers outperform them not just in reaction time, but reaction time under situations of dexterity and increasing conflicting visual and auditory stimuli. So they truly are elite athletes in that regard too.
Yes, sir.
Can you speak to some of the skills that the gamers are bringing that are directly relevant? I'm sorry. Can you speak to some of the skills that some of the gamers are bringing that are directly relevant to some of the technology that the Army is using, and how do you showcase that in your expos?
We've kind of done some of that in, like at PAX East, we also had Captain Mitsoka from the Army Cyber at West Point come up with us as well. We had the Black Daggers as well, so we kind of had a full showcase of there, and that was kind of some of that crossover, where we had 1-versus-1 League of Legends against our players. We had lines that would stretch out for about 2.5 hours just to go 1-versus-1 against our soldiers. But that was that perfect opportunity for them to see all of those kind of specific skill sets showcased. We're not specifically targeting one skill set because there are so many. League of Legends player has to have teamwork skills on top of their credibility in that title, whereas a fighting game player is an individual player, and they have a different skill set of using math and other skills to break down what we call frame data on what skill sets to use against their opponent. So we don't want to paint a very close brush. We want to make it as broad as possible so that we can hit every single career management field that we can. Yes, sir.
Hey, how are you? I'm Patrick Murphy, so full disclosure, I'm a CrossFitter, so I appreciate it. 2 questions, one for each of you.
Thank you. So first question is, with CrossFit, I know like at West Point, General Swan's on the board, visitors there, and we have a cadet team at West Point, functional fitness team. We don't call it CrossFit because we don't endorse a certain product. But there is a building competition like around the Army-Navy game.
Yep.
Are you all participating in that, and is there an intent to bring a potentially to the mass media, around, even if it's regional. Obviously, I know Greg Glass with the CrossFit Games, et cetera, but, so that's the first one, and then I'll follow up if that's okay.
Yeah, no, we are planning that as we speak. One of my teammates, Captain Casey Clark, she was a West Point athlete and a team member. She's organizing for us to be a part of that initiative, not going head-to-head against the two cadet teams, Army versus Navy, and obviously we know who's going to win, but yeah, we're definitely going to be there. And what's really great too is we do have full support from CrossFit HQ with this initiative. So when we were at the CrossFit Games this year, we had the absolute opportunity to meet Greg Glassman, the CEO of CrossFit, and he invited us to his dinners that he would hold every single night for his headquarters staff. And he introduced every single one of us on the team to everyone who made CrossFit what it has become today. So there definitely is.
Didn't we just have the #2 CrossFitter at Fort Knox?
Yes, we did.
In the world.
Yes.
Put a video
Second
together.
fittest man, yeah.
Because I always joke, the #1 CrossFitter is Matt Frazier, who is outfitted by Nike, and Nike was started by an Army veteran, Bill Bowerman and Phil Knight, for the record. But about entrepreneurship, but that's another issue. On the gaming, which, and again, I agree with you with Twitch, and it's a platform that most Americans don't know about, but it's used by more people than NBC, CBS, Fox combined. There is a new arena being built in Philadelphia. It's the only gaming venue in the world right now, just on esports. So it's being built by Comcast, which is the largest sports. So I think there's a potential there. Again, Comcast started by a veteran after World War II. So I think there's there. I'll make sure, Frank, I'll get with you if that's okay, to be helpful.
They're doing a big ceremony on the 12th of December. I can't make it, but we're getting somebody up there.
That'd be great. That'd be great, because that's right for Army Navy, which is on the 14th. So that'd be terrific, and I think it'd be helpful. So I think that's all I got. Thank you both, and thanks for your service.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
My question's for the captain. My sergeant major said I should either challenge you to a push-up contest or ask a question.
We could do both, sir, if you want. We can do the new hand release push-ups.
So my question is, what we found is about two out of 3 Americans don't qualify to come into the service, and a lot of that is for physical fitness. Do you have an assessment or a inclination? Is it they're lazy? Is it there's access to physical fitness? Is it time in their schedule? What is it that causes them not to be fit? And is there something we can do to help increase the size of the pool?
That's an excellent question, sir. I think it really comes from a lack of knowledge, because the beauty of functional fitness is you can get your butt kicked in a 4-minute workout. One of the hardest workouts in CrossFit is called Fran, and it's supposed to just leave you on the ground for about 15 minutes after you finish it. And it's just all out, high intensity for about 4 minutes of air squats and pull-ups. I mean, with functional fitness, you can do it anywhere, and as long as you start integrating and providing the knowledge that this is possible into the general public, then I think it's an easy win. I personally don't believe in laziness. I think even with kids who are at risk for obesity, there is something they are truly passionate about, and it's just a matter of shifting what they're passionate about as well.
Well, thank you both very, very, very much. I think the last time I did anything intensely for 4 consecutive minutes, there was beer involved.
Beer mile, sir. Actually, I think the beer mile record is 4 minutes and 23 seconds.
It wasn't me.
So.
That way, that was not me. So thank you both. Sergeant Jones, I did have one question. We saw an image of General Muth participating. How do you do?
He did well. He did well.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, please. Thank you both very, very much. Okay, you're up.
Okay, hey, I'm Major General John Evans. I'm the commander of United States Army Cadet Command at Fort Knox. And let me start off by saying to General Ham, thanks, sir, for sponsoring this opportunity for both myself and Recruiting Command to talk about the Accessions enterprise for our Army. So Frank and I are not the totality of the Accessions enterprise, interestingly enough. We don't represent that. We've got certainly other Accessions platforms out there, United States Military Academy, Officer Candidate School on the officer side, but we account for about 95% of the folks that come into the Army. So between the two of us and our commands, we're pretty busy on a day-to-day basis. So what I'm going to do is I've got about 2 slides, and then I'll kick it over to Frank, and then we'll be happy to take your questions. But one of the things that we did, because we came into command together, and we've been friends for a number of years, we're both Army aviators, we come from the same tribe, is we took a look at the current dynamic of how we do accessions. And what we found was we had created an artificial bifurcation between the officer accessions pipeline and the enlisted accessions pipeline that wasn't necessary, and it certainly wasn't beneficial. So what we did is we signed a memorandum of agreement last year that in effect said that we would cooperate at every level on everything that we're doing to make sure that we get the proper young man or woman into the job where they are going to be best self-actualized and of best service to our Army. Because frankly, there are some people that walk into a recruiting station and say, I want to be an Army officer. I know I want to be an Army officer. You're a recruiter, right? I want to be an Army officer. And they go, hey, let me tell you something, buddy. You don't really want to be an Army officer. What you want to be is an 11 Bravo. So, I mean, we've seen that year after year. And at the same time, I've got youngsters that go to college and they're not prepared to be there, or they may run into some type of financial difficulty. And we often just show them the door and say, hey, thanks for being part of Army ROTC, but best of luck with the rest of your life. Instead of going, you know what, you have a desire to serve, you want to be part of this selflessness that we have in our nation to be able to do something greater than yourself. I want to walk you down the street and hook you up with an Army recruiter. And then you can find a way to serve your nation and come back and get your education. Because as Frank and I like to say, the Army wants to put everybody on a path to higher education. And that's about marketing. That's not about the skill sets that are required in the Army necessarily. It's about talking to the parents and the influencers and the coaches and the pastors and community leaders out there to make sure they understand that whether you go to the military academy at West Point or whether you enlist in the United States Army, we're going to give you an opportunity to make yourself better. We're going to give you skills training for sure, but we're also giving you an opportunity to get a scholarship, to get tuition assistance, to get the GI Bill, and get you to where you want to be in life. And whether you retire as a sergeant major with a PhD or whether you go to your Army career and then matriculate out and go on to go to college and become a captain of industry somewhere, doesn't matter to us because we want to help you be your best soldier and best citizen. So let me get the first slide. Okay, it's up. Just to give you an idea of scope, when I talk to people about Cadet Command and Army ROTC, I say I'm the scale guy. This is what I do. I do scale for the Army. So West Point is going to commission, on average, about 1,000 kids a year. That's their capacity. It really doesn't fluctuate much. It'll be a little less, a little more, depending on how the class does. And they've got a 5-year model. They've got to recruit a kid in the first year. They got to start them there as a freshman, and then they got 4 years of education. 47 months, all paid for, one of the best deals in America, a brilliant institution and a real landmark of our country. But they're only going to do 1,000 people. OCS is kind of a rheostat that we can use, right? So we can turn that rheostat down and kind of go with a low number, 600 to 800, or we can crank it up a little bit and probably go somewhere in the 1,500 range to provide officers for our Army, mostly in the active force. All of our West Pointers will go in the active force. And then ROTC, we're scale. So what we do at ROTC is we commission about, and this year will be the first year we'll do this in a while, 6,000 officers across the total force. So about 65% of the officer force gets assessed through Army ROTC. We feed the active, reserve, and National Guard components. You can see how we're broken down just so you have an idea. I've got 7 regional brigades, and I've got 1 brigade that is specifically the senior military colleges and the military junior colleges. And those are the ones that you know. It's the Citadel, Norwich, Virginia Tech, Texas A&M, University of North Georgia, and who did I forget? VMI, thank you. Thanks, Pat. So those are my 6 senior military colleges, and I've got 4 military junior colleges as well in 1st Brigade. But you can take a look at the number of programs that are out there in the scale. We've got 274 what we call host institutions where we have a flag planted, and we've got a professor of military science on the ground administering to that college and university, and then they will have extension units where they might have 1 or 2 members of their cadre that are at other universities out there. And in addition to that, we will accept students from what we call the crosstown universities, universities that are further still in most cases, but not big enough to require a permanent cadre member. We will allow them to come to an extension unit or a host unit to take military science classes. So all told, we are touching about 975 colleges and universities across the country in Army ROTC. We are the largest grantor of merit-based scholarships in the college system, bar none. We grant more scholarships even than Alabama, so believe it or not. And you can see kind of the size with regards to our cadre. We do this on a bit of a shoestring as you take a look at 975 universities that are being serviced. I've got about 2,000 cadre in the field that are doing that. So it's really kind of impressive and humbling to watch them at work. All right, so that's the senior side of what we do in Cadet Command. So I really have 3 missions, 3 priorities that I focus on in Cadet Command. The first is to build the Army's best lieutenants, and I do that through the senior program. The second is to foster and build world-class cadre, and we do that with the help of HRC, who provides us great personnel, and then we do that through our programs here and a schoolhouse that we've set up at the School of Cadet Command that allows us to teach them how to teach. They already know how to lead. We're going to teach them how to teach so that they are providing the best lieutenants. And then the third thing that I do, and I didn't even realize I did this until I got the job, is I provide world-class citizens through junior ROTC. Can I get the next slide? A busy slide, and I want to take you through it real briefly before I kick it over to Frank, because I think this is important. So one of the things I didn't realize that I was responsible for until I got this job was Army Junior ROTC. We didn't have that at my school when I was in high school, so I really had no context about what it was as a program. I had seen it. I'd seen the kids, you know, when I was at my duty stations out there in their uniforms doing their thing at their high schools, but really had no idea what the basis of the program was. And it is, first and foremost, a citizenship program. So there are 3 strategic value propositions for junior ROTC, and I want you to remember these because I think they're important. The first of those is our mission, and that is to build world-class citizens. Junior ROTC kids are generally going to have higher GPAs. They're going to have higher graduation rates. They're going to have lower teen pregnancy. They're going to have lower gang violence. They're going to have lower dropout rates. Everybody where we've got programs loves them, from teachers to guidance counselors to superintendents to governors to our members of Congress. Everybody loves junior ROTC because of what it does to build citizens for our country. So that's strategic value proposition number 1. The number 2 strategic value proposition is that it really gives us a bit of a bounce with regards to recruiting. Now this speaks to the charts that you see over here on the left-hand side, and I'll break them down for you as you read through the data. We've basically got about 3,400 junior ROTC programs across DOD. The Army owns about half of those, about 1,700. So that's 305,000 kids that are in junior ROTC just in the Army. And what we found out as we tore the data apart on this over the last year at the behest of Secretary McCarthy to say, hey, what type of return on investment do we get from junior ROTC with regards to our recruiting force? We found that somewhere between 20 and 25% of the kids that are in junior ROTC will go on to serve in the military somewhere. They'll either go to a service academy, they'll matriculate into the senior ROTC program, or they will enlist in one of the services. So 20 to 25%, not too bad. So we tore that data apart a little bit more, and here's what we found out. That if there is a junior ROTC program at your high school of any flavor, Army, Navy, Air Force, or Marine Corps, because they have all 4, you are twice as likely to enlist in the United States Army than if there is no junior ROTC program at your high school. And you don't even have to participate in the program. The mere presence of the program at your high school has at least a corollary effect on your desire or your willingness or your propensity to serve your nation. So pretty powerful data point there for us. And one of the reasons that Army senior leaders are currently looking very hard at what we're doing with junior ROTC and trying to decide if we've got it right or do perhaps we need some more of this because we get that 20 to 25% bounce to start with. And if you go to one of those schools, you're twice as likely to enlist. I'll wrap it up by saying this. The third strategic value proposition for junior ROTC, and I think this is one that we all have to continue to think about, is that one of our greatest strategic challenges moving forward, certainly we've got China out there on the horizon and other things, but one of our biggest strategic challenges moving forward is being able to man the all-volunteer force. So what we do by introducing young men and women to the Army culture in junior ROTC, we know that only 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 are going to join the military, but what we do for those other 3 or 4 kids is we demonstrate to them that this is a culture of purpose and of meaning. It is one that is grounded in Army values, integrity, and honor. And when you become an influencer later in your lives, as high school graduates and then college graduates and mothers and fathers and teachers and coaches, I want you to carry with you your experience from junior ROTC so that you can, when the opportunity presents itself, tell young men and women that service in our Army is worthwhile. And I think that's our most important strategic value proposition. So with that, I'll stop and I'll kick it over to Frank.
All right, so first foremost, what do you think? No, I mean, you know, every time we go stand up in front of a crew, you know, a group of folks, we always ask, what do you think? But before I start, General Ham, thank you so much. I will tell you, this is the Army of the Army uniform of the future. The recruiters are going to get them first. There are senior leaders out there, smattering about 100 that have them, general officers and CSMs, but it's mostly gone to the recruiters. 150 up in New England. We're getting another 350 probably this month, and then by the next fall, this time next year, we should have anywhere up to 10,000. What we find is it's an awesome uniform, and as we have walked around all over the United States, and I've been to New York City, Boston, Philadelphia, Kansas City, Milwaukee, Chicago, LA, Seattle, and Portland, anywhere we go, and Dallas, people that are not even service related stop us in the streets and want to take our picture. This is the effect on the American public. It's a classic uniform. It looks fantastic. The soldiers want it now. And when we go into the high schools, it's a topic of discussion. A couple things real quick. He and I agree to the low stack. We think it looks better. It's more historical tradition. We do the non-stay bright, same thing. And then we do no break on the pants. Anyway, just a little thing. Although walking up on the hill in the summer, this belt seals all that heat in. You're soaking wet at the end of the day, but still. Recruiting the Army of tomorrow today. That's what we do in the United States Army Recruiting Command. And when our team came together last summer, the first meeting I had in the Pentagon was showed up after taking command. I've been in Saudi Arabia for 2 years. I show back. I said, General Townsend, I'm taking command. I haven't taken any break. Can I take a week off? He says, yes. I come back from that, and on my calendar is an appointment for lunch in the Pentagon with the Secretary and the Chief. I assume it's with all these other 2-star commanders. Why would they want to sit down with me for an hour and a half? I go up there. No, it's me in the Secretary's office having lunch with he and the Chief for an hour and a half. Just a little bit of stress. But anyway, there we talk about it. We weren't going to make mission. And we were going to fail by 6,500. 76.5 was the mission. And we just made barely 70,000. And I knew the importance of what we had to do across the sessions. And it wasn't just myself and Command Sergeant Major Gavia, who was actually the smart one in the group. It was the entire sessions process had to change. But we also knew that from that meeting, I knew we were going to have the horsepower and the support of the entire senior leadership of the Army. And if you can describe it this way, the Titanic was heading in the wrong direction. The engine was operating at 30% power, and the rudder was stuck. And what we did across the board in the sessions process in 1 year, we fixed the engine, and by about April and May, it was operating at 100%, probably with a Hellcat supercharger on it too. We fixed the rudder, and then we turned the Titanic 180 degrees. And we did that across the board, what we call the 3 M's, and it's manning, money, morale, and mission command. And so the accessions process and the accessions senior leadership could handle or had to handle the manning and money because I can't affect that. Internally, we had to do the morale and the mission command. And General Milley slapped the table on November 15th and said, USAREC will be at 100% by January 15th, and we were, imagine that. And then we had money as much as we needed for marketing and specifically focusing it on 22 cities across America. And by the way, we had a 15% lift in those 22 cities over this past year. And at the end of the day, when we got everything in place, it was probably April. And then the Titanic took off. And the numbers started rolling in. And when we closed out on 30 September, with the mission of 68,000, we were 68,185. And when we finished that, the first question we got from somebody, they said, well, that's great, but you almost made 70 the year before. The difference is this, it's the quality marks. And the first thing the secretary said at that lunch was quality over quantity. We will not sacrifice one for the other. And the quality marks at the end of the day was we had issued 3.5% less waivers than the year before. Our Cat 4s are allowed to go to 4% across DOD. We closed out at 1.7%. Our females, we went from 17.1% to 18%. Not since 2004 had we had that much. Our minorities increased by 3%. And then, which some people don't understand, but our debt pool, our entry pool for the next year, I call that the checking account. Because if you imagine that on 1 October, we've got to have somebody to put in the pipeline. So we overproduce contracts to be able to take us through there and give us enough for the first 3 months for our machine to get rolling again. And we added 13,500. The year before, it was about 9,000. The year before that, it was 900. And we really actually need about 20,000, and we'll get there this year. So all of that was from this accessions process changing from the industrial age into the digital age, and it was a true renaissance. And it was done across the board, like I said, externally, but also internally. But how do you do that? How do you get after 68,000? Slide, please. Well, let me tell you what starts with, believe it or not, is we have got our recruiting brigades. We've got 7 of those recruiting brigades across the board. We have 44 battalions. We have 270 companies covering down on 1,405 locations and 44,000 zip codes, trying to recruit 68,000 accessions. Accessions are the ones that get on the bus this year. And then the contracts are those, including the ones that are going to ship the following year. So how do you get after accessions of shifting 68,000? We have to talk to 20 million. These numbers are backed up from 1974. We've been keeping all the data. To get 68,000, you start by either impressing or talking to or messaging or somehow contacting what the secretary calls eyeball to eyeball, 20 million. Out of 20 million, 600,000 will say, sure, I'll come in for a meeting. We call that a make an appointment. Out of that, 400,000 actually conduct, because 200,000 never even show up. Out of that, 195,000 will agree to take the test, the ASVAB. Out of that, 105,000, give or take a few, will actually pass. Out of that, about 90,000 will agree then to go to MEPS. But even then, they're not always committed. And out of that, about 85,000 will actually commit, contract, and out of that, 68,000 will ship. It starts with 20 million people of the Z generation that we're going after right now, which is 33 million. And then you get into who are actually qualified and who are propensed. And when you do that, the qualified and propensed is about 400,000. And then we got out of the qualified, you've got a couple more million on top of that. So, but you do it with that force. And they're out there in the trenches every day, and they're recruiting and putting them in boots. So how did we get after it, and how did we change the mindset, the morale, and the mission command? Slide, please. It was through a series of initiatives. And these initiatives were, keep going, one more. So these were all the initiatives that we started last year. And whether it was the esports, and by the way, this started because we went down to the trenches and we listened to the recruiters. That was the first thing she and I did. How can we see ourselves unless we're down there and we're listening to them? And this guy is a classic example. Sergeant First Class Jones, out of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, a recruiter, station commander actually down there. He gets word somehow through us, DMs somebody that was working with us, direct messaging, by the way, that got a hold of us and said, we need to look into this esports thing. Literally, that was a week before John and I were actually having a Diet Coke one Friday night, Diet Coke, at his house, and we started talking about esports, and we thought it was very important. So we said, this is something we need to do. He contacts me, and then we went ahead and through his pitch to myself and Command Sergeant Major Gavia, we started the esports team, and that was in August. And they didn't get up and running until the first soft opening was January. By the way, the e-fitness team, we were in the L&O office in the Pentagon, myself and Command Sergeant Major Gavia last September. And General Abrams, big CrossFitter and functional fitness, approached us there. He hadn't gone to Korea yet. And he says, have you guys thought of standing up a warrior fitness team? That's where the idea came from. And Command Sergeant Major Gavia ran from it there. I'm going to talk about 2 more recruiting initiatives that we started. We have what we call the Recruiter Live Fire. The Recruiter Live Fire, besides the esports and the fitness team of generating the most leads that we've ever had, this is the number 3, which has never been done before. We have a 6-week course to become a recruiter, and it's at the recruiting college right there at Fort Knox. And traditionally, the last 3 days is your big test. And they would sit across from a desk to a recruiting instructor and try to get them to join the Army. probably not really give them a lot of confidence. So the Commandant last year, a guy named Colonel Carter Price, put together a concept, we called it Recruiter Live Fire, and he went to Louisville, and he took the class. And we have 2 classes running, one for recruiters and one for station commanders. He created mini stations. They got in a bus, they went to Louisville, and they went all throughout Louisville for 2 days, gathered leads. It was pretty good enough for us to put them now on another bus and send them to Kansas City. And we continue to do that. We went to 33 cities throughout this United States last year. And the big one was Shreveport. We got 295 leads in 2 days. And then it just started going up from there. It went so well, we've gone from 2 to 4 days, and these young men and women are getting contracts before they get back on the bus or on the plane and come home. And then that's good for the local unit. But the biggest thing is we're finding that it used to take them 90 to 120 days to get their first contract. Because they have so much confidence now, they're getting it within 30 or 45 days. And once you get that first win for a recruiter and the recruiter mindset, it makes a huge difference. So through all of these initiatives and all of these efforts, we were able to get after 68,185. And this year, it's only going up because the Army is on a slow growth path, and we know that. And what we're finding right now, and I'll finish up with this, traditionally, when they come out of the end of the year, the recruiters, if a station doesn't take a complete knee, they take a partial knee. Because really, that June, July, August push, they are literally working 7 days a week to meet mission. And they'll come out and they'll just slow down for October, November, and December because one, they know they have the entry pool that they can just keep pushing, but they're also pretty tired, and we get that. That has not happened this year. And it's through a myriad of things to include these initiatives. And what we found is we finished October halfway through October and started recruiting for November. Now, halfway through November, we are now recruiting for January because we washed December because of Christmas. We're already recruiting now for January. We haven't done that in 4 years. And we think we may be able to, by early December, actually start recruiting for February, which is one of our toughest months, which will help us immensely. Last year, we were behind from day one at about 4,000. Right now, the model has us over by about 600. And all of that is through the initiatives, but it started with the Accessions enterprise taking a hard look at itself and changing out of the industrial age to the digital age. So John and I look forward to your questions. Thank you very much.
John, thank you. To follow up on the junior ROTC.
Yes, sir.
So the map looks pretty compelling. Why not just expand?
So there is discussion about that right now, sir. The cautions with expanding junior ROTC is because, like, as you can imagine, junior ROTC and the senior program to a little bit lesser degree can be political footballs. So once you plant a junior ROTC program somewhere, if it does not attrit of its own volition, you're very unlikely to be able to ever shut it down. So it's a sunk cost. So senior leaders want to be very deliberate about looking at the puts and takes on expanding junior ROTC because once we establish those programs, it'll be virtually impossible to disestablish them. So we're just being a little deliberate with the process, sir.
General Muth, Matthew Cox, military.com. So could you talk a little bit about any new or different initiatives in the recruiting strategy as compared to last year's strategy?
Yeah, so I will say it's not new, but it's gotten to the point where we were creating, a lot of these were recreated, it's never been done in the Army. The one that we're probably finding now that is really starting to take off is what we call the fusion cell and the fusion process. And we were not stumbling, let's just say we gave ourselves a D last year because we didn't know how to do it because we had never done it. So anyway, we feel we're at a B, probably a B minus right now, which is we meet every quarter, and every representative from across the Army, whether it's a MACOM or you have some type of asset that you can provide, comes together at Fort Knox or at Fort Eustis. And we coordinate, and it's a sliding 4-quarter scale of every event that is now going to either, for example, we're going to have the Taste of Chicago next summer, and we're already planning for that. And we're going to have the Golden Knights jump in. We're going to have the Silent Drill Team there. We're going to have the Fife and Drum Corps there. We're going to have, let's say X type of equipment that's going to be used there, whether we borrow it from the Guard or whatever. We are now, and we're going to have this senior leader. This is the message. They're going to meet with the mayor. They're going to meet with superintendent, educators, nonprofits, first responders, all to open doors, get access, and give information. That is something that I think this year will now move into its ability to truly influence, where last year we were just getting it up and running.
Are you still focusing on the same 22 cities, or have you expanded that list?
So it's what we've done is we have the 22 cities, and for those who don't know, it's basically 22 cities that we've identified where we have a large qualified military available QMA population of youth, but the propensity doesn't exist. And we find that the propensity doesn't exist because of lack of information, lack of veterans, lack of posts and camps and stations. So we've gone after these 22 cities. What we're doing is we have now added what we call P2Cs, priority population centers, that influence those different cities. And it's because it's not Dallas and Fort Worth anymore. It's like Dallas-Fort Worth. It's a big metroplex. What we're doing is identifying those cities that we see as must win and then must keep. And once we move one into must keep, as you can imagine, your resources drop. Because winning it, you've got to overmarket, you've got to put more assets and resources in there. And what it's allowing for us to do, and I'm going to get to your answer in a second, it allows on a sliding scale throughout the year to constantly look at those cities and see where they are. For example, we are this close to moving Dallas from a must-win to a must-keep. And so my answer is the 22 cities may change because some of them move into a must-keep, which means we will now have them still, but we will kind of reduce our marketing dollars in there just enough to keep it instead of win it.
Okay, thank you. And so the goal then for next year, your current goal is what, just to make sure I'm clear on it?
It's north of 68,000. I haven't been given the mission letter yet.
Okay, thank you.
General Siemens, did I answer that one correctly? Okay.
So what I would say is, I mean, we're getting ready to launch a new campaign. It'll launch this weekend.
Potentially Monday. We think it could be Friday or Monday.
Yeah, soft release maybe over the weekend. It could be a big release on a major network. We'll see what happens. But really, it's about awareness, right? And it's about talking about your Army story, whether you're a retired officer, retired NCO, whether you served 3 years or whether you served 38 years. Get out there and talk to young people about what the Army did for you. It is rare for me to find someone who's left our service honorably who doesn't have a positive story about what the Army experience did for them. Even if they chose not to continue to serve after their initial term of enlistment, what it did for them from a self-discipline standpoint, from a characters and values standpoint, I mean, that stuff sells itself. I mean, you know, people talk about strategy. I think our magic is our culture, right? And culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Mm-hmm. So I will focus this on chapter presidents for AUSA, CASAs, members of AUSA, and you could also include veterans too. Get to know your local recruiter, because they are, so the fusion cell, that what we were talking about earlier, is something for the bigger events. There's 100 events going on in recruiting today, right now, across those 1,405 locations, and every one of them needs a local influencer to be involved, because it helps them connect to the community. And so if you're asking what you could do, is especially my message to the chapter presidents when I talk to them at AUSA and to the CASAs at the annual conference is, do you know the local recruiter's name that you live near? And do you have their phone number and email address? Because if you don't, you need, and you want to help, that's how you can help. Because a lot of them are doing monthly telecons with their local influencers and CASA reps and also with the chapter presidents. Because they say, hey, I'm doing this event at City Hall. Can you help, or can you get me more access? Or can you know the superintendent, can you bring them in? So we focus on elected leaders, educators, nonprofits, first responders, and then there's local influencers, meaning they're not any one of those, but you know they got the wasta to be able to open the door.
Sir, a couple of the topics you have up there, the mobile recruiting and virtual recruiting stations. It seems that the Army, to me, I take that as the Army's moving away from kind of brick and mortar recruiting stations and so forth. Could you go into a little explanation of what those two entities are about?
Yeah, it's just Frank Muth's view that we're not going to ever go away from 100% brick and mortar. Because at the end of the day, you're asking somebody to commit to a changing or a new path to their life. To do that, they need to sit across from I think they need that human contact. But there's a number, and I don't know what it is. But we sit today with 10,000 recruiters. And as we introduced both AIE, which is our new operating system in the next couple of years, and IA, we bring those together because once you do that, you may be able to have a predictive analysis of who's coming in, their ability to make it all the way through first term, and your ability to kind of truly get to that quality number that allows for you to reduce some of that force. Added to the virtual recruiting stations, which are a 3-person station at every battalion, and they're potentially one of our highest lead generation sources this year. And it is a paradigm change from in the past, it's always been face-to-face. So if you bring all of that together, there is a number that we can get to. Is it maybe 8,500 instead of 10,000, which puts 1,500 more soldiers back in the force? It could be something like that. But until all of that comes together, which I think could be 3 to 4 years, we're going to have to hold at a certain line. I think we could go down a percentage or two, 5% in the next couple years, because all of this stuff we're doing on the digital side is helping a lot. So we'll see. But I think in the future we can go down. I will say another service tried to go not 100% virtual, but cut a lot, and it was difficult for them to make the mission.
Hey, sure. Mike Flanagan, CASA, Southern Virginia. Partnership for Youth Success Program, been around 20 years. Just a spot report from the field. I don't think it's fully weaponized, if you will. And I'd love your thoughts on this. You've got Soldier for Life, we talk about, which I think is a great, we are all soldiers for life. I think it resonates with people. Whether you do a 20 years or you do 4 years, you transition to industry. And so we go around as CASAs and other folks, and we recruit companies to be PAYS partners. But I don't think there's a follow through there. It's a great recruiting tool. When I talk to mom or dad and I say, hey, when we recruit your son or daughter, it's not just for the Army. They're a soldier for life. They're going to have a career that follows them after their military service. But on the backside of this, when you talk to folks, career counselors, et cetera, I'll tell you again, spot report, they're just not clued into PAYS. They don't understand it. They don't understand what's being told to new recruits. Cadets. When I talk to cadets and I say, hey, do you know about the PAYS program? Do you know, especially if you don't go active duty, you could go to a company, get an interview after you come back from your initial training. They don't know about it. Yeah. And so, big Army-wise, I think we're missing something here. But, sir, I'd like either of you, your thoughts on that. Do you recognize that? Are we doing something?
So first, I'm signing a PAYS agreement with Bell on Monday. We've been working it for 6 months now. For anybody who doesn't know it, Partnership for Youth Success. We're just shy of 900 right now. We have 100 Fortune 500 companies that are doing this. I can't speak for the officer side. I can just tell you when you enlist in the Army, at a portion of your contract, if you sign up for PAYS, it's a drop-down menu. You click onto the company that you want to put into your contract, and when you're out of the Army in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, or 20 years, you're guaranteed 2 interviews. Not a job, but an interview. The companies love this because what we give them is soft skills, and in many cases now also hard skills. This whole thing about maybe showing up to work on time, or maybe coming back after lunch. The companies fight for this stuff all the time, or the right attitude, want to win, part of a team, communicate. All of those things that we provide, we give them. And by the way, it's not just companies, it's local governments. So myself and Secretary McCarthy signed one with Governor Sununu up in New Hampshire, because state governments want to get involved too. I'm surprised to hear that if you're talking about the transition counselors on the posts, then that's on us. And I'll take that on and try to get the word out, because it is a powerful tool to have, to be able to walk in and say, after 4 years of being a Apache helicopter hydraulic specialist, to be able to go back to Bell in Fort Worth and say, could I apply for a job? And by the way, with an aging workforce, these companies are drastically trying to hire right now, or at least get into the technical colleges, because they've got to be able to keep that production and industry going, and the input is not as high as they need right now, especially for the future. But I'll take that one on and take a look at it. John, your thoughts?
Same thing. We're working on the same type of functionality that Recruiting Command is working on our GoArmy.com page for what goes on the officer side, and we're also working to educate throughout the process, the program for ROTC, the same alternatives, particularly for people that are going to go into Compo 2 or 3 and may not have secured a job yet for the future as Army officers.
In the back.
Hi. So we know that a huge problem with recruiting is that around 1/3 of people my age, the prime age, to enlist, are overweight. And there are solutions to this: healthier school lunches, more recess time, more nutrition education. So my question was, what role does the Army have in advocating for these issues that are kind of outside the purview of the Army but are important for national security all the same?
Yeah. It's a great question. I will tell you that, we don't have, I can't speak for the overall Army on this. I can speak for USAREC, and I just know that we're in as many schools as we can get into. And these are soldiers that are up there talking about it. We also have programs where we'll go in there, and we call it the Leadership Reaction Course, where we set up in the gym where they can come in, and part of it's physical fitness, part of it is problem solving and critical thinking. And it's also just kind of having that role model. Just the soldier that's up there and a cross-section of soldiers that, are looking soldierly and having a discussion about what they do in the Army and telling their Army story. That, as far as Recruiting Command, that's what we do, and it's kind of just being ourselves and telling our story. But I can't speak for the Army. Do we need to get that message out? Absolutely. I would tell you right here, this is part of it. So part of it is the Army Warrior Fitness Team getting out there, because it's not just about going to these competitions. They will literally, some of them, just because they'll go home for leave, they go to the local high schools too. Sergeant Furman is from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and that's the guy that was, that big guy, right? So he went down there on leave, I think it was last spring, anyway, it was over the summer. And he went to 3 different high schools. He ended up getting like 5 contracts, because he just walks in there and he talks to the guys in the weight room, or he talks to just the population. So I know, again, for USAREC, it's both, like I said, it's the recruiters and their message, but it's also the Warrior Fitness Team. John?
Yeah, I think holistically, from the strategic standpoint, we're trying to model behaviors moving forward that we want America's youth to emulate. So ACFT is part of that. That's that physical fitness component. But we've also got a nutritional component, and frankly, believe it or not, folks, we're thinking and talking about sleep now. We're lucky to have a neuroscientist here. She could tell you things that would blow your mind with regards to sleep, I have no doubt. But we've not done that well in the Army, because if you can't get by on 2 or 3 hours sleep a night, you're not hard. You're not, right? Forget about it. I've flown airplanes in conditions where I would be considered legally drunk based on lack of sleep, and was suboptimized in my performance, no doubt, and my decision making. We're moving around. We're getting around to it slowly, because it's a culture thing for us. But what you find is the Army tends to be an agent of social change for our nation in lots of regards, and we're trying to do that, modeling that with ACFT. There's the Spec 4 mafias out there right now bad-mouthing the ACFT because it's going to be hard. Yeah, it's going to be hard. But guess what? Our adversaries are going to be hard too. You got to be harder than the enemy if you want to win. And as General McConville tells us, winning matters.
What he said.
Hi, sir. Dave Hudak, Soldier for Life, now working for Guidehouse. Quick question for you on the recruiting side. Congratulations on making your numbers. But as you know, there's lots of specialties within the Army. And can you talk a little bit about how close you were to the micro goals?
Yeah, we call them the precision mission, right.
And how do you right the ship if some are low and some are too high?
So first of all, we were off on the precision mission. I can't remember all the different numbers. Meaning, did we fail in that? No. Could we be better? Yes. We started off this year with some low numbers in October, but we're now, since we're recruiting out to January, our numbers across the board, and they identify right now, I think we have about 14 precision MOSs that we need to get in the green, and we actually are in the green, just so you know, and we're over for both phase line, we call it phase line November, and now we're also into January. So we're getting better. How you fix that is, one, the way the recruiting works, it's amazing. If you start recruiting deeper, meaning I'm not filling in 30 days. I mean, when you're at the point where you got to put somebody on the bus in 30 days to make the seat, what you're doing is it's anything that's available in the system. And you tend to not have a lot. You can't give people choices. When your force is overproducing and you're recruiting deeper, I have more training seats open and available. That's how you get after the precision mission, 1. 2, you increase bonuses, which is always an option. And then you put the emphasis on it. And you tell the recruiters, we need to push the following different MOSs that are out there. And we're doing all of it right now. And so the numbers that, again, I reported to the senior leadership in these last 2, both again for November and February, look very strong. And I think that we're going to be able to both hit our number. I know we're going to hit our whatever number I get this year. I think we're going to get back up to our precision mission 2. And the 2, just to be fully transparent, the 2 that we were challenged in was, well, the 1 mainly was 11 X-rays. But I think we're going to be up. We made up last year from what we didn't make the year before, which was a lot, but we still have a little bit more to go.
Yeah, for General Evans, John, could you talk about some of the initiatives underway between you and General Williams at the Military Academy in sharing training opportunities for ROTC cadets and West Point cadets?
Yes, sir, sure will. So we've always done a pretty good exchange, and the Military Academy has been a tremendous partner, and Lieutenant General Darrell Williams has just been top-notch during my time at Cadet Command. One of the things that I did when I came into command is I looked at our model for summer training, and for ROTC, the large summer training event happens in the summer of the junior year. We call it Cadet Summer Training, CST. I took a look at the West Point model, which was different because they have something going on every year, from showing up and going to Beast Barracks when they first get there to going to Camp Buckner and doing other things throughout their process until they finally graduate and they have a shorter kind of third-year summer training opportunity. And what we did is we looked across the force was we realized that we really weren't acculturating our ROTC commissioning cohort and our West Point cohort until they got to first unit of assignment. And I thought we'd missed an opportunity. So I went to General Williams, the chief, the secretary. A lot of this was a function of a panel that was put together by Secretary Esper with John Abizade, General McQuiston, and others that were part of that process to take a look at what we could do better in the pre-commissioning source pipeline to make a better officer cohort and find efficiencies. And what we've done is last year we sent a handful of cadets from ROTC up to West Point for summer training, and we brought 40 cadets from West Point down to the tactics phase of advanced camp, about 2.5 weeks, so that they could do force-on-force simulation training with our cadets in the field. And what we found was the blending was seamless. Virtually no difference in their aptitudes, their abilities, their skill sets. The high performers flock together. Those who aren't the high performers also flock together, just the way it worked out. This year, we're going to take that to the next step, and we're bringing about 400 of the rising seniors from West Point down to Fort Knox, just shy of 400. And we're going to do this pilot on a little bit broader scale to see if this is something we want to continue in the future. But I can tell you, it's very important because we all tend to come from our tribes. We all tend to have our own rice bowls. And I tell my cadets all the time, the day you show up as a second lieutenant in the Army, nobody cares where you went to college. It's not important. So the more we push these cohorts together, I think the better off we're going to be with the officer force.
So I want to thank you again for being here. As I shared, I believe with one of you, that I am obviously part of AUSA and director on the education arm. But when I step out of AUSA, I have an awesome opportunity to be an educator at a community college. I'm also a CASA, not a military CASA, but I'm a court-appointed special advocate. And thereby, I have a great opportunity to work with the youth on various levels. And I'm curious, what are you telling those who are not affiliated with AUSA, the Army, or Army Brat, or what have you? What messaging are you sharing with them to encourage our youth to join the military, specifically the Army? One of the obstacles that I continue to hit when I interact with parents or even some of the youth, join the Army, yay, I'm an Army Brat, I'm proud, I've been with AUSA for almost 15 years. They keep saying, I don't want to go to war. They keep saying, the parents say, not my child. So I push against that, but I'm trying to find out, what are we saying? What is the message to say it's more, yes, it's more than just that. I'm trying to find out what should I be equipped with, what should other educators and that I can share with at my community college be equipped with answering those questions to push back what they see on the news and TV shows.
So here's we consistently talk probably 3 or 4 different messages. One is it gets back to those soft skills, and it really, I mean, when you talk to both influencers about the soft skills of our youth today, they recognize that there may not be as many as they either used to have, or certainly what they could say the Army provides. That's one. 2, out of the 150 MOSs, when you finally, whether you stay in or you get out, you get out of all of them, there are certificates that you get. Even an infantryman can get multiple certificates, whether it's, whether it's through a master fitness course or, just all these different courses that you can get. And then if you get into the harder MOSs, the hard science or the STEM ones, you get a lot more certificates. So that's another. The other is the education benefits. While you're on active duty, of course, tuition assistance, but then when you leave, 9/11 GI Bill, I got to take advantage of that, gave 18 months to my son and 18 months to my daughter, saved us $100,000 out of our pocket. And then if they come back to the war piece, you go, I come down and I say, look, out of all our MOSs, it's I don't know the percentage, but it's a small percentage, maybe 5 or 10% that are considered truly in the front lines combat arms. There are a lot of MOSs a majority of the MOSs are STEM related, whether it's a medical tech or whether it's an IT specialist or whether it's a radio communicator, it doesn't matter, but they're out there and they're supporting. So there's other things. If you don't want them to be in those frontline units, there are opportunities for them to be able to still serve and then come out later. And as a veteran, we know this. They vote more, they do better in college when they come out, and they contribute more, and they're better citizens. So there's a lot of arguments for not serving, and there's a lot of reasons why you should serve.
Yeah, let me add one thing, too, and this is what I focus on with the officer force, but the same thing can be said of the enlisted force as well, and that is, we're going to teach you a skill in the Army, and some people tend to become a little skill-focused, right? Okay, what am I going to learn that I can go out and market later on? Okay, so the number one skill we're going to teach you in the Army is leadership. Because after 20 years in the Army, as you come out as an E8 or an O5 and you go on to do something, if you don't know anything about logistics, but you want to go run the Walmart distribution warehouse, guess what? If you're a leader, they can teach you about logistics. If you're a logistician that doesn't lead, you're not going to get that job. So leadership is the number one thing that we teach in the Army, and when you talk to people in the industry, it's the number one thing they're looking for.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Thank you so much for being here. Dina Flynn, I'm with Adobe, also an Army brat. They're talking more and more about youth today don't have that direct connection. Where my kids, at least, their grandfather and their great-grandfather, they've heard stories, they understand more. As you all roll out this new campaign, What's Your Warrior, it's related to her point. How are you educating our high school counselors? Because I think those folks are the closest to these students. They see their record, they see where they've succeeded, they see where things have gone good or bad, and before they can really even get to those recruiters with the permission levels, depending on if the child is 18 yet or not, how are you trying to use that messaging that you're really pushing out in the general public for marketing back to those high school counselors? Because if they don't understand, like you're saying, what is that metric? Give them that percentage of those MOSs that are truly the forward fighting versus all the other ones, and try to help them categorize some of those STEM categories, because then they're armed with better information. Because I just don't think they know, and they'll say, oh, I'll leave it up to the recruiter, but if the recruiter's not really able to get in, or the kid doesn't sign up to go see that recruiter the day that they show up in high school, it's kind of like a lost opportunity. So I was just trying to see how that's threaded in.
So a couple things. One is, last year at this time, Warriors Wanted came out. Everybody felt really good in the Army about it. But my recruiters told me in Chicago, New York, Boston, Milwaukee, Seattle, keep naming them. And all of those are our 22. They don't resonate. What you're going to see come out, whether it's Friday or Monday, it's going to resonate. Because it goes beyond somebody that's at the tip of the spear. And it adds focus on other, it has that, but it has other, it showcases those 150, but not all 150. It's a portion. But this is chapter 1, and they're going to release them as chapters. And it's showcasing all the different types of MOSs that the Army does. Why? And so that it comes down to, what is your warrior? Because everybody has a warrior inside that they can relate to, their passion and their interest that relates to an MOS or a skill set that the Army provides. And that's how you translate what's your warrior. Now, getting back to how we get that message out, we have talking points ready for every recruiter, all 10,000 of them, and they are going to go out there and inundate the high schools on a regular basis to get what your warrior, or what is your warrior means. On top of that, the senior leadership, every time we go out to a city, to whether it's the 22 or any city, for example, when I go to Dallas on Monday, besides that event, we're meeting with local educators. Every chance we get, we talk and we sit down with them. What can we, and we have a dialogue about what the Army offers. And it's really interesting when you have a sit down. They may be somebody that's done this, and the door opens up. And we also have education tours throughout the year. Every battalion does one, every brigade does one, and then we do one, and we bring in educators from across the United States and do the exact same thing. And we have a message. And I'll tell you, 9 times out of 10, they leave there. Besides, they get to, if they want to, they get to jump with the Golden Knights, which helps. But they leave there with a better understanding, and we get access at that point. And by the way, legally, we can get access, but there's access, and then there's true access, all right? And if you remember that scene from Caddyshack where the caddies got 15 minutes in the pool, and then they had to get out. Anyway, I'm a movie buff. But that's what we get. We'll get access, but you get an hour. And we want you in the back of the gym. You're not allowed to talk to anybody, but they can come up and talk to you if they want. Where other places, it's you can come in anytime, and that's what we're looking for.
Let me add something too, and this is where you as parents, frankly, and our CASAs can help us here. There are places, to include the largest public school district in the country, where the kids, the school doesn't get credit from the district for encouraging a kid to consider military service. It's not considered career and college ready. So there's no incentive for that guidance counselor to sit down and say, hey, Mr. Muth, I think you'd be great at being a soldier. You're not quite ready for college yet. You really don't have a plan for what you want to do from a trade standpoint. But there's lots of opportunities out there. We can't even open up that discussion in most places because there's no incentive for the school to do that because the district doesn't reward them. If they go to college, the school gets rewarded for that. If they go to a trade school, the school gets rewarded for that. If they go down and work at Walmart as a greeter, the school gets rewarded for that. But enlisting in the service, no. So we've got to change some of that, and I would encourage you as influencers in the community and our CASAs to go to your school systems and ask, what are you doing with regards to granting college and career ready credit at the school system level and rewarding schools who are encouraging our youth to take a look at military service as an option.
Okay, good afternoon. I also work for AUSA, but I'm stepping out of my shoes of an AUSA employee and coming to you as a mother of an ROTC cadet, and was a junior ROTC cadet as well. And his goal and career aspirations are to be part of the military. But I also know that there are several with him that have medical issues that basically they say, no, you cannot join. So I'm just wondering, with the recruitment, has there been any changes or foreseeable changes on maybe what the waiver requirements are?
For recruiting or cadet?
For recruiters as well as for cadet,
okay. For us, it's we're looking at eczema right now. So first of all, the biggest, not discriminator, something that needs waivers these days is ADHD. So if you're on Adderall and asthma. But what we're trying to look at potentially is to reducing needing a waiver for eczema. And the other one is there's an eye refraction problem that you potentially don't have now, but they can detect you're going to have it in 15, 20 years. And we're trying to get that reduced, meaning you don't need a waiver anymore. So we are looking across the board at some different aspects of waivers, not just on the medical, but some others that are kind of outdated. And we may not, but that's not an easy task. It takes years because that falls under the DOD regulation that we're governed under, and you have to change the regulation. So the multiple committees it has to go through.
Yeah, so same kind of thing Frank talked about, but I can tell you with regards to my ability to grant waivers is pretty significant. I can grant medical waivers for anything but behavioral health, and behavioral health has to go up to the Department of the Army, and for the right reasons, I think, at least at this point. Here's my challenge, right? When I got to Cadet Command, I asked my doc, what waiver authority do I have? And it took them 4 months to be able to tell me exactly what waiver authority I had in my job. And I would have a young man or woman who was propense to serve, came from a military family. All they wanted to do was be an officer in the Army. And they'd say, you know, you've got this physiological problem with your knee. And sir, you know, the reg says this is not a good bet. You know, we shouldn't waive this kid. And the brigade commander would say, recommend no waiver. And I would look at it and go, okay, so this is a kid who you tell me he's got a bad knee, right? All right. High school varsity athlete, captain of the Ranger Challenge team, 300 plus on every PT test he's ever taken. What exactly about his knee is going to keep him from being effective as an Army officer? Now, the kid that makes a 184 on the PT test and the minimum score is a 180, I've got to commission him. But this one here, you're telling me I can't commission because you're worried his knee's going to fail? I tell you what, I'm going to roll the dice. This kid's going to be an Army officer, okay? And so this is kind of the approach, and Frank and I are both taking this approach in remembering, and I value our doctors and lawyers, but they are advisors, and the commanders get to make decisions.
And I'd just like to say I'm so supportive of the junior ROTC and the cadet ROTC in the colleges. And my husband, who is also retired from the military, also commissioned through ROTC way back when. And I was his wife going when he called me up and says, come meet me at the ROTC building. And he signed his paperwork, and I'm like going, what did you just do? But been with it ever since, and we're great supporters, and I wish there was more in more schools. Unfortunately, my son is now Army ROTC, but when he was junior ROTC, he was Navy. So it was a bit of a transition for him.
We won't hold that against him.
And but he's following in his dad's footsteps, I hope so.
Awesome. Thanks for that support. Yeah.
Well, I would just say, as the recipient of a waiver, not medical, to enlist in the Army, I don't think waivers are so bad. It's actually okay. And Mike, I'm sorry that I didn't recognize you. Colonel Retired Mike Flanagan, the civilian aide for Secretary of the Army, also joined us. Thanks for joining us today. Kent Brager, Sergeant First Class Jones, Major General Evans, Major General Muth. What a great team, I think. And I think we heard today some great ideas about how the Army is thinking very, very differently to attract, recruit, and retain the quality that this Army will need going into the future. And I would just say, with the example of a young officer, a senior non-commissioned officer, two great generals, I think the Army is on the path to success. Thank you very, very much, all of you, for participating today.
Good job, guys.